When Goliath looked down at David coming toward him across the field, I'm sure he thought, oh, this is going to be a quick fight. And even though David had some confidence, I am also quite sure that he thought, whoa, this is a big dude. And the bystanders on both sides probably thought, well, this is either going to be really short or really weird. Now, it was short, but not the way that Goliath thought. You know, in the world of today, it can seem overwhelming. There is report on every hand of violence, of cruelty, of sadness, of sickness, of disasters, and it can make us feel like hiding. It can make us feel like, you know, there's just nothing we as individuals can do, and so maybe our best strategy is to sort of shrivel up and hide. Well, I'd like to take you on a journey with me. I'd like you for a moment to set aside skepticism and be David. So come with me on a journey, and I can guarantee you on this journey, you can affect hundreds of lives. You, by yourself, in the next few days, can positively affect hundreds of people. So let me tell you a little story about how I got to be the messenger for this, and then invite you on a challenge with me. If you saw my earlier video, you know that I had a socially backwards childhood, and I was very picked on, behind, and so forth. I skipped a grade and spent my entire youth through high school being a bookworm, outcast, no social skills, and that sort of thing. And if you haven't seen that video, it's kind of funny. You might want to watch the other one. But anyway, in my first year of college, I had an epiphany. It changed my life, and it left me knowing for sure that my life was in my hands, that I actually controlled my destiny. So when I joined the workforce after college, I did really well. I began to get jobs, and I got promotions. I got wonderful opportunities, and I was promoted quickly. And I started to make a lot of money. And after a period of time, I got to be well known in the company I worked for. And after some more time, I got to be well known in my industry, and then in the country, and then eventually in the world. I became a sought-after international speaker and spoke in Mexico, Canada, all over the US, Europe. I was invited to the Orient, and so forth. And so these promotions and this notoriety came quickly, and I made a lot of money, and I made a name for myself. But without realizing it, I had made all of my decisions by a particular formula. And this was the formula. Now, I didn't think of it this way at the time, but this is effectively what it was. And it's success equals add gold to the wallet. Right. Success equals add gold to the wallet. Now, as you might expect, that brings with it a set of problems. You know, the only thing that we really have as a commodity in life is our time. We trade our time for money. We trade our time for relationships. We trade our time for happiness. We trade our time for whatever you want. And I ended up trading my time for money. And in fact, I traded relationships for money. And I traded my health for money. And I traded my happiness for money. And eventually, as it always does, the day of reckoning came. And I got really sick. I got really sick in my body and in my mind, and it seemed for a time that I might die. In fact, one night it seemed very likely, and that night was so awful that it seemed to me as if I did die. Now, I've heard lots of people talk about near-death experiences and seeing light and those kinds of positive things, and mine was nothing like that. It seemed that I had left my body and had gone to some place of suffering, some kind of hell for a long time. I'd lost consciousness, and I don't really know what happened that night. But at some point, I remember suddenly hearing the feeling, and I said that on purpose, hearing a feeling that said, it is enough. And somehow I survived the night, and I regained consciousness the next afternoon about 5 o'clock. And it caused me to start really reflecting on my life. You know, I'd made a lot of money. I'd made a name for myself. I had done a lot of things, both in and out of work. But all the people that interacted with me may have been better or worse off because I did everything for me, and I wasn't worried about the other. Everything was add gold to the wallet. And so even though I had made all of these things, I hadn't made a difference. So I decided from that moment on to live my life a different way. I changed this equation to be success equals add good to the world. Add good to the world. I decided from that point on to make decisions based on whether or not they would lift and bless and add good both to people's lives around me and to the world. And I found in doing that, my own happiness began to multiply. I began to actually make a difference. I began to be really happy. I lived life in a positive and effective way. And since that time, my life has been completely different. And so I want to invite you to come with me on a journey. I want to invite you to add good to the world. Now, I'm going to be more specific. I know that's kind of nebulous. But before I do, I want to tell you about honeybees. Now, a honeybee is one of the most industrious insects. We all know that. It spends its entire life buzzing around, pollinating flowers and making honey. But do you have any idea in its entire life how much honey one bee makes? It makes 1/12 of a teaspoon. That's right, 1/12 of a teaspoon. Now, it would be really easy for that bee to say, I think I'm just going to kick back. I don't want to do all that work. I mean, who's going to miss my 1/12 of a teaspoon? They don't. Fortunately, they work together and they make gallons and barrels and boatloads of one of the most nutritious substances we know, honey. And so even though it might seem, like I talked about earlier, that we don't make a big difference individually, I want to tell you that that's not true. And that's why I want you to come with me and add good to the world. So here's the challenge. There are 4 simple steps. Each day, for the next 10 days, I want you to do 4 things. I want you to pick a circumstance each day and say to yourself, you know what? I see a need. Right this minute, I'm going to do something different than I normally would. I'm going to add good to the world. Now, I'll give you some examples of what that might be, kinds of things that it could be in a minute. But first, just decide, you know what? Here's a circumstance. I'm going to add good to the world. Step 2 is to actually do it. Carry it out. Step 3 is afterwards, just reflect for a moment on how you feel. And step 4 is to come here and share with us. So step 1, decide on a circumstance, carry out your promise to add good to the world. 3, reflect on it for a moment. And 4, come here and share your feelings. Now, adding good to the world can be something really simple. It can be a smile for someone who needs it. It can be stopping to comfort someone who's sad. It could be forgiving a grudge. It could be extending love. It could be taking time to explain something difficult beyond what you would normally do. It can be something complicated and time-consuming, like going out of your way to help their neighbor clean the garage or mow a lawn or get involved in some community affair that you otherwise wouldn't do. Now, what I don't mean is to get to the end of the day and think back and say, well, let's see, I helped so-and-so at the office, so I did my good deed. That's not what I mean. This is an intentional decision. You say, I'm going to add good to the world. Do it. Think about it and share the feeling here. I can promise you that if you do this, you will affect hundreds of lives in the 10 days. Because each time we do this, there is a ripple effect. You know what I mean. You drop some water in a puddle and the ripples go out. In fact, if you think about it for a minute, if you take a drop of clear water and you drop it in a puddle of mud, it doesn't clear up the puddle of mud, but right where it lands, it's clear. And in addition to that, it pushes the mud back. It pushes the darkness back. So come with me on this journey. For 10 days, add good to the world. I invite you to join me.